Okay. This video is not about Anglo-Saxon Israelitism. If you don't know what that is, then you're lucky, because it is something that is very, very dumb, that very dumb people believe about Anglo-Saxons being one of the lost tribes of Israel. If you Google it, you will encounter an enormous amount of rubbish that you should never ever waste your time with. This video is about actual things that really happened in history, and basically that is to do with the Anglo-Saxon conversion to Christianity. As most people are aware, Christianity is actually a Judaic Abrahamic religion, and the Anglo-Saxons formerly worshipped pagan gods of their ancestors, Woden and Yngvi. I've made videos about both of them. But they had to be convinced to convert to this new religion, and all their religion had formerly been about being very, very conscious of traditions, about what their ancestors had done, and preserving the ancient ways. Now, how could they then be convinced to worship a foreign god? How could they be convinced to change from worshipping warrior gods to a meek god of forgiveness? How could they be convinced to worship a god who has a chosen people who are a completely different race in another part of the world? Well, we can see partly how they were convinced by the skillful use of poetry and slight tweaking of the stories in the Bible to make the Jews seem more like Anglo-Saxons, and to equate the Anglo-Saxons with Jews, so that when the Anglo-Saxons were reading about the Bible and about the Jewish people, they didn't think of them as being so foreign, and that they maybe thought they were a bit like them. Now I'm going to look in this video at a few examples to demonstrate exactly how this was done. The first example is Andreas. In this poem, the Myrmidonians are the bad pagans, and the bad pagans are somewhat familiar to the Anglo-Saxons because they have already been told by the bishops and such about bad pagans in Europe, the Vikings, the Danes. So by equating the Danes with bad pagans in the Bible, like the Myrmidonians, then it therefore equates the Anglo-Saxons as being like the Jews who uphold the old faith.
Ich the Andreas adra onsenda to chleo on to chlodr, in thus hadran burig, heida aliseth, of thisum leod heta.
This is very similar to another Anglo-Saxon poem. This one's called Judith. And in Judith, the Assyrians are the bad pagans who are equated with foreigners in Europe, thereby showing the Jews to be like the Anglo-Saxons. And in this story, there's a very bad pagan called Holofernes. And being a bad pagan in Christian religion, that means you go to hell. And in that poem, they describe it as snake hell. And this is very similar to what we think of in Anglo-Saxon pagan, like Germanic pagan conceptions of hell, where Nidhogg in Norse paganism is said to gnaw at the roots of the world tree deep in the underworld. Snake hell is not really a very Christian way to describe hell. The third, and perhaps most interesting of the three, is a translation of Exodus from the Bible into Old English, and it's dated to about the 8th century.
Here was that handlayan, and him hold Freya. Ye sailed a whapna, ye wailed, with rathra grira, overcome with the campa. Kneo mea fella, feonda folkrit.
In these lines 19 to 21, Moses is depicted like an Anglo-Saxon warrior leader. And in line 29, the Jews are described as a chosen people, and there's an allegory between the Anglo-Saxons and the Jews, each of whom have migrated, from one land to the next, and are seen to be chosen. Well, the Anglo-Saxons were supposed to conceive of themselves as being like the Jews in the sense that they had migrated, and also in the sense that they were chosen. Not chosen to be Jews, but chosen to be Christians, and that was the new faith. Therefore, the Anglo-Saxons were able to consolidate a new identity that was Christian, but not offensive to their sensibilities as Northern Germanic people. And also it habituated them to very foreign conceptions theologically and culturally that were really Jewish. Of course, if the Jews are meant to be seen like Anglo-Saxons in Exodus migrating across the desert, what then does that make the Egyptians, the bad pagans, probably to be seen very much like the Vikings? However, they're not just seen like the Vikings in this sense. It could even be seen a bit like the Anglo-Saxon pagan ancestors. You can tell that from the kind of language that's used to describe the Egyptians.
Thar was ingera eildum vitam. Deatha ye drinked, treat folkamast.
In line 33, it describes the Egyptian army as the Inghera, which means the army of Ing. Now, Ing is Ingmifrey. It's an Anglo-Saxon god. It's who the Anglo-Saxons often believe themselves to be descended from. Very important deity. Now, here they're being encouraged to conceive the Egyptians as being like their bad ancestors who were still pagan in those days, or perhaps there were still in the 8th century, or there were still in the 8th century pagans in England. So this way they could be shown who the naughty people were, the pagans in the Bible, and to equate them with those pagans in their own families and in their own communities. In fact, the use of Ing is used 3 times to characterize the Egyptians. They're even called the Inga folk, the race of Ing. And of course, we know the Egyptians had absolutely nothing to do with Anglo-Saxon deities. In this way, the Anglo-Saxons deceived into thinking of their own ancestors as foreign, and as a foreign race as being like them. I've talked also in my film From Ruins to Ruins about the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons, and I made it clear that once the Anglo-Saxons converted to Christianity, they used Woden as an ancient progenitor figure, very much like Abraham is used by the Jews. And they all traced their genealogies back to Woden, who was himself shown in Anglo-Saxon genealogies to be descended from Noah, because they had to reconcile their pagan ways with the new Christian narrative of history. This is quite a complex process of integration, and it shows how propaganda and psychological manipulation are used to trick people into giving up their ancestral ways and adopting new ones, because if you tell them the truth, they wouldn't go along with it. A warning from history.